Hello, YouTube. This is the Compound Fracture YouTube channel, and this is episode 4 of our Let's Play Suzerain, the brand new game that we are playing sight unseen. We do not know what to expect, but so far we're having a damn good time with this game. It seems to be a very well-written game for the most part, other than a few little grammatical snafus that I'm sure they'll fix with a few patches. I really like the branching storyline. The biggest problem I think we're dealing with right now is the reality of this period in history. You see, this is the 1950s, and we have a very, very loose, or actually very tight, really, tight analog to the real world in the same time. This is Cold War, after all. We are caught between two great powers. Not allying with either of them might be a problem. We promised in the election to become closer to the East, and we've also promised to go with a planned economy. We have tried to make friends on the left within our country, and we have decided to crush the fascists with as much weight as we can muster. Now, the trouble with all of this is that we also want freedom. We also want democracy. We want to democratize our economy and our nation as much as possible. And the big allies to the East, the ones who agree with our plans to feed, clothe, and house all of our people, they don't like democracy all that much. It threatens them. And also, our soon-to-be allies in Agnolia here, which we feel like we must ally to because Rumburg threatens our northern border, they have an antagonism with the East. So we're concerned about that. We're very concerned. We would love to be non-aligned so we could pursue our own path of democratic socialism. I do agree that democracy is, in fact, the blood of socialism. It is the lifeblood. It is what carries oxygen throughout the planned economy, in my mind. But the Eastern powers disagree. I see our country overview is flashing. We haven't even checked this tab, and we've been playing for almost 4 hours now. This is very interesting indeed. Gives us a quick overview. We've distributed stimulus checks, but look at this. We have all these red things which seem quite poor. Is there anything we can do about them? No, this is just interesting. Ooh dear, nationwide revolt. I mean, we know about all of this, but we're not in a good state of affairs. Interesting. I did not know we were an OMEC member at all. Well, that's good to know. So let's look at the news. The Whole Sword Post talks about an emergency in Anrica. 20 police officers heavily wounded, 2 police stations burned down, and several shot. The city is in a state of emergency, and they are trying to restore order. The birthplace of Swordish nationalism, right near our capital. Local fascist leaders have announced that they will assist local enforcement with the task of keeping the streets safe. Okay. That is terrible. The fascists and the police are working together. What else could it possibly be? We're glad that we didn't give the police more money back when the police were talking about stopping the fascists. We're glad that we did not trust them, because that trust would have been terribly misplaced. So now the paper talks about the funeral that we spoke at. A huge crowd of mourners, including us and other senior officials, joined for a rare display of unity, poured into the heart of Dyer today to bid farewell to Bernard Circus, the poet and politician, who we miss terribly. With hundreds of police officers in riot gear on duty and traffic barred on major thoroughfares, the normally chaotic section of the city took on a somber atmosphere. Millennialist anthems played from loudspeakers along Freedom Avenue as Swordish citizens of various ethnicities stood shoulder to shoulder, many of them in tears. Others leaned out the windows or over balcony railings to watch the procession. President Rain gave a unifying message to all of Swordland. Yes, we did, by attending the funeral. He paid his respects and met with his close relatives. Rain also made an emotional speech that touched thousands of attendees. He finished the speech with a quote from Circus. We did well in that speech. President stands together with Red Youth, says Swordland today. I'm glad to hear that because they were very mad at us for having defunded their party. I drew criticism. I don't care about criticism. When I agreed to attend the funeral, while the decision was not totally out of the ordinary, the fact that I gave support to a known member of Red Youth throughout his life was unusual. This paper is a little bit conservative, you might say. Later in the day, we were seen together with a group of Red Youth members standing together and paying respect. Nationalists who saw Circus as a traitor, and fuck them, by the way, heavily criticized the president's move, which will surely continue among the conservative wing of the USP. Never would Sol have thought that his party would be led by someone who stands together with a communist. Well, too bad, Sol. Too bad. Welfare issues of Narble. Narble, a city that was once an important trade stop for the Marquian Empire, has been in steep decline. Interesting. So we've got some rural regions that are in some trouble. The unrest is continuing meanwhile. Tension between the far right and the far left continues. We have picked our side and we will stay with it. The radical says we need democracy. We have long demanded the expansion of civil rights and reforms to modernize our nation. When the previous government blamed the Supreme Court for not allowing the reforms, the opposition was quick to point out the flaws within the Constitution and brought focus on reforming the government structures to open the way. This is what we ran on. This is what we decided to do when we first became president. We have not yet done it, but we must. We will stand up to the establishment. You will see. Nothing from The Economist. That's good. And Geopolitico says the response to Rumsberg consulate closure was quick. A strongly worded official letter. Not directed to Rumberg, but to all surrounding countries. We hope to build alliances, people. That's how we'll defend ourselves. Here, a young swords member, oh dear, Proud Boys, basically, claimed that he has connections to government. Well, he sure does not have connections to me. Investigation ongoing, you say. Okay, well, if he does have connections to government, we will root out those members of government. Now it's time for a briefing. We have scheduled a meeting to discuss the progress of the Reform Committee about the new Constitution, what we just read about in the newspaper. This is good. I took a seat on the center chair in the vacant meeting room as soon as I waited for them to show up. The reforms were slowly becoming the most significant expectation of my government. We would be changing Seoul's Constitution of 1929. And yes, we will change it. Most people nowadays blame the Constitution for the outstanding problems of the country. I think there's plenty of blame to be placed on the government that followed Seoul as well. Kind of both bad. On the other hand, the reformists in the assembly have been getting louder about their demands. What I knew for sure was that I needed to do something about this encroaching chaos before it swallowed me. It's never a good thing to be swallowed, just ask Captain Ahab. Meanwhile, Dinosaur, Pieter, and Naya had been leading the committee to prepare an initial draft for the constitutional amendments. I was intrigued to hear their results. There was a knock on the door. It was Dinosaur. Good afternoon, sir. Lucian arrived exactly on the hour mark again. His punctuality could almost be described as obsessive. Interesting. Well, we could put him off guard with a comment like this. I don't know what that would accomplish, so let's just be generous. Good afternoon. He took a seat on the table and took out a bunch of documents, spreading them on the long table. We should begin the meeting as soon as Mrs. Morgana, who is, that's Naya, yes, and Mr. Vice President arrives, assuming he comes at all and isn't too hungover, that bastard. We finally have some results from the Reform Committee. How does it look? Well, the situation is quite complicated, but I'm sure we will make it work, just like we accomplished many things before. I hope so, Dinosaur. I hope so. We'll go over the details regarding the new constitution in the meeting. A few minutes later, Pietro and I arrive. After a short chat, everyone sat down and took out their notes. I knew it was going to be a long meeting. I'm glad we took a break, and this is a new YouTube episode. There's a lot of talk going about the future of this process. Let us begin to tackle the points of contention. Mr. President, our committee meetings were really fruitful, and we already started working on the constitutional draft together with the reformists. They demanded a little too much, but I've had success with Friends Richter to create a realistic draft that could potentially go through the Supreme Court. A little? They demanded to rewrite the whole Constitution. I mean, yeah, that's what we're here for, Pietro. Are you paying attention? The requests were definitely not outrageous, just not realistic in today's circumstances. Oh, Naya, I don't know about your realism. Justice-mindedness. Just because it wouldn't pass the Assembly. Nonetheless, I'm glad that we are reaching common ground already. If we can reach an agreement with the reformists, says Lucian, we will be very strong in the Assembly to propose the change. I agree here. Can we reach a 2/3 majority? I think we can. Seems good to me. If we can get Friends Richter, he is the leader of the People's Freedom and Justice Party. I assume the Freedom and Justice Party is kinda libertarian, right libertarian. That's what it looks like to me. Interesting. Okay. Our only problem would be uniting our own party. We'll never be able to get the NFP to work with us, of course, because fuck the NFP. We need the majority of our 130 seats, with the PFJP's full support of 70 seats. Oh yes, that is the liberal Soc Dem party, yeah, of course, with a very capitalist leader. We should be really actually quite careful to keep Friends Richter more or less on our good side, even though we don't really like his politics. He is the sway vote within Congress, within the Assembly. But it'll be tough to unite the USP with all the divisive wings that have formed. You must make them follow you loyally. Well, yeah, we did it before the elections. We can do it again. I'm confident. Albin Calvin and his reformist wing should be supporting you. He already weighed heavily in the committee meetings. That's good to hear. However, the conservatives would be tough to break. The influence of Sol is still living strong in the party. How many votes do they have? They have around 40 seats, really? There are many unaligned people, and some of your loyalists might decide to show their true faces too. So we need as many of the conservatives to support us, and there's only one person who is key to make them back us. Okay. Gloria Tory. Should we sell out our principles to this Gloria Tory? Perhaps we should, just to get this passed. If we don't get this passed, our government will have been a failure, and that'll surely hurt us in the future. She's well respected by the Solists. She'll be our biggest obstacle, and her demands will be extensive. Oh dear. I also have reason to think she might be in Orso's pocket. She will be tough to break, but we'll need her help to get the conservative support. What about the Supreme Court? They are the biggest obstacle. Even if we pass the Assembly, the Chief Justice will do his best to block our amendments. We will need at least 6 of the 11 judges to vote for the proposal, but Mr. Hawker has enormous influence over the judges. Well, we are looking to disempower the judges, so it's very hard to imagine them supporting us on this. So Orso is the one also who might have Gloria Tory in his pocket. He's an old judge. Aren't they all? A staunch establishment supporter. Oh dear. We do not want to have to rely on this man. If we can find a different source of support that is not the conservative wing of our party, maybe we'll be able to get something done. Reach out to judges in secret. I agree. I think we do need to consider all means. Naya is taken aback. Well, Naya, you are too rulesy for me. According to the Constitution, I'm a member of the Supreme Court, which means we already have one vote. Good. 2 of the judges are friends of mine and of similar opinion about the reforms. Consider them with me. So we have 3. We need 6, though. So who else would be willing? We're not going to bribe anyone. That's not the type of game we're playing at the moment. We might consider it only if there are no other options. I think Judge Edmonds can be persuaded, and in extension, Mr. Dalton and Mr. Merton. And none of those are Orso, are they? What was Orso's last name? Where are we? Okay. We clicked on him earlier. Let's try going back. Here he is, Hawker. So none of them are Judge Hawker. Okay, good. They weren't really blinded by the soulist ideology. Yes, those 3 don't seem to be working directly with Chief Justice Hawker. Okay, there it is, right there. If we can get to Isabel Edmonds, we might be able to get the 6 votes needed. That is our best bet. I agree. What are the demands? We should run down each of the main demands of the committee and get your input first. Mrs. Morgna can explain them further. We'll start with the first red line. The new constitution will fix the loopholes regarding the president's absolute veto powers. Even though Mr. Richter put on a whole show about why vetoes should be completely removed, the committee has almost unanimously agreed on fixing the loopholes, thus limiting presidential vetoes. My suggestion is to add a clause detailing the methods the Assembly may override a veto with some sort of super majority. One person should never be able to block the rest. I agree. It's interesting. So Mr. Richter is the reform leader who, if we can get his support, we might be kind of guaranteed to get the assembly on our side, and that would be like wonderful. That would be half the battle right there. So perhaps we should just like completely give in. Interesting. So I think I do stand in agreement with him. I think we should reach out to him. Whatever you decide, it's important to get a balanced picture. We will be making history by changing the Constitution. Yes, we will. The second is about the judiciary. The new Constitution will remove the Supreme Court's right to vote on legislation. Very important. This is yet another point that was unanimously agreed on by all parties. Tarquin Sol established this rule to protect his 29 Constitution. We all know most of the judges are still his pawns. Constitutional amendments will still be very difficult to accomplish with a reform like this, particularly because we will keep the 2/3 vote system to be able to propose a change. However, the judiciary will not have a final say. Well, this is, in fact, what we want to do. Yes. Yes, it will ensure that there won't be another politically motivated Supreme Court. Apart from these 2 critical points, they have other major demands. They want to reform the appointment procedures of the ministers. Mr. Richter clarified that the Assembly should have a say in the formation of the Council of Ministers. That is something that a majority of our party also supports. Well, Mr. Richter also talked about abolishing the Member of Honor rights of Tarquin Sol. That gives him the absolute immunity and makes him a permanent member of the Assembly. Oh, geez. Okay. Well, that one is a controversial one. I doubt the USP would like that, says our vice president. Interesting. Immunity of the justices, the impeachment of the president, limiting the power of presidential decrees, all of this came up during the committee meetings. Yes, reformists expecting big reforms, while our faction in the USP are not very keen on pushing changes that are too great. So screw our own faction. I'd say keeping everything in the middle ground is the safest bet. Oh, Pieter, so naive. No need to agitate anyone too much. They are already agitated, my friend. Huh. I think comprehensive reforms must be pushed. Naya agrees. That's good. Well, regardless of what Mr. Rain decides, we will need to work together to push this agenda. Unless we are to replace you, Pieter. Dinosaur says, now that we have a better picture of your intentions, sir, I will start reaching out to my contacts to make a draft that works for us. Naya will present our input to the committee. In a few months, we will have the draft on our desk to make changes for ourselves. I think this was yet another fruitful meeting. Oh, yes. Together, we will democratize Swordland. Beautiful. I have Naya's support, and Pieter's, and Dinosaur too. Wonderful. The meeting is done. The game is saving. A news story has arrived from the Radical. The Workers' Party of Bludia? Really? Protesting the electoral campaign finance bill, which was a mistake. We've already admitted it was a mistake. They lost half of their funding. Okay, yes. Well, we are not actively trying to suppress you, my friends. We are passively and accidentally suppressing you, which is often the case in politics, really. Not everything is done on purpose. Usually it's just at the service of not saying no to the wrong person, which is what happened here. We didn't want to do a presidential veto. The Swordish State Corporation has reported that preparatory work for the highway has started. Well, that's excellent news. Soon we will have a new highway. And a bunch of jobs to go along with it. In Wholesword, there is a meeting with Chief Justice Hawker. I am not looking forward to this meeting. Let's hope he doesn't offer me a cigar. The department set several documents which required my signature so they could start working on the new decisions that were taken. After I signed dozens of them, I closed my eyes to relax. Another long day. Even though I really wished to leave the palace for the day, Dinosaur had earlier told me that Chief Justice wanted to speak to me. We planned to meet in my office in 30 minutes. I waited for him, wondering what subject he would raise. I don't think we want whiskey. We're trying hard not to be an alcoholic in this game. Not at the moment, anyway. We are smoking an awful lot, but that's okay. Smoking will only hurt us in the distant future. I stretched out my arms and looked out the window. Thousands of shimmering lights in the Wholesword skyline were mesmerizing. Suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. It was Dinosaur. Good evening, sir. Good to see you. I'm going to be very kind today. Good to see you too, sir. Yes, I'm sorry that I couldn't explain the situation to you in detail earlier, sir. The Chief Justice insisted on seeing you this evening. I do not know what he has to say, but it'll probably be about the new constitution, and I'll probably want to slap him in the face. Yes, I will. He will be coming shortly with Judge Mr. Garassi. Who are you, Garassi? What do you believe in? Infamous for his obstructionist methods against President Alfonso. Oh dear. Okay. We shouldn't take them lightly. Well, they're almost certainly going to be here to threaten us, so I think we can just... Yes. Dinosaur agrees. Hawker and Garassi have entered the room. Good to see you. Good evening. I'm going to call them gentlemen. Get on their good side before I lay down the hammer. Good to see you indeed. May I, he says. Let's have a seat, gentlemen. We all took seats on 2 opposite sofas and made ourselves comfortable. How were your first couple months, Mr. President? I hope you're faring well. Thank you. It's been very busy, but I'm doing good. It will only get busier, yet I think you are doing a good job so far. Oh, thank you, Garassi. Okay. Considering all that's happening around us with the shootings near the palace and the soldiers on our border, oh, is this a backhand compliment? He let out a deep sigh. It is a troubling time. We appreciate your concern, says Dinosaur. So, says Hawker, you probably know why we're here. I have some idea. I'm going to ask him to enlighten us. We know you are working on a new constitution. The Supreme Court does not approve of this. With all due respect, says Dinosaur, the Constitution needs to be updated, sir. I'm sure you are well aware of the public demand and our circumstances. Is that so? I see that you are the one who is not aware of our actual circumstances. Oh dear. You want to make a weaker constitution in the midst of problems from both inside and outside. Even if your proposal passes the Assembly, I will make sure it will not pass the Supreme Court. That much is clear. I feel like perhaps an accident is in order. But before we get to that, let's see what our answers are here. We can set ourselves as his enemy by telling him, even if he does not cooperate, we will win, which is possible, but he is very powerful. We can appeal to his... It's not really an appeal, is it? It's more just a stating that he is against us and against the concept of progress rather than the actual proposal. We can call him out on his threat. We will not, however, figure something out. Let's do this. Do you think I live under a rock, Mr. President? Oh, he has spies. I know what's going on. Yet you, Mr. President, seem to be only partially informed about the current situation. Let us explain the reasons of our stance. Let's hear it. We are protecting the Constitution because it works, Mr. President. It is efficient, and it gives you the authority to lead the nation with swift decisions. I see they want to scratch my back, so I'll scratch theirs. Fortunately, my back is not particularly itchy at the moment. Swordland has more important problems and threats that we should face right now instead of nitpicking about some paragraphs of the Constitution. We have a potential war within our borders. Orso signaled Heron with his hand to let him speak instead. Mr. President, I know that you are a busy man, so I will make this quick. We all know that Swordish security forces found stashes of Rumburgian weapon in the hideouts of Bloodish separatists. KA-74s are roaming. Really? Guns can roam around on their own? Okay, inside Swordland at the moment. As much as Rumburg poses a direct threat, now it's clear that they are also intervening in our country and weaponizing our minorities against us. I agree, and the solution is to protect the minorities. It's not unprecedented to think that the Bloods would start their terror again with their new toys. Not if we protect them. Not to mention the fights that broke out between the left and the right wing after the shooting of Bernard Circus. Communists are rising with the support of United Contana. The chaos is imminent for Swordland. And sadly, we don't see our administration taking the necessary precautions. You said you will not focus on military during your term. That is correct. Under current circumstances, that cannot be tolerated at any cost. Well, then you, Mr. Hawker, cannot be tolerated. Let's remain a little bit pleasant. The court has no jurisdiction over the matters. Aren't we all part of the state, Mr. President? We are all responsible if Swordland fails to overcome these threats. But regardless of that, are you also aware that the armed Bloodish separatists have direct connections with the Workers' Party of Bludia? Sure. Yeah, that's okay. Participatory democracy, unions, minority rights. Yes, I'm quite a fan of that, actually. Well, we could say everyone knows that, because I assume everyone does. We could try to draw a wedge between the separatists and the party. Interesting. I think we'll do that. We want to defend the party. They may claim to have no ties with the separatists, but most of their members used to be part of them before they formed the Workers' Party. Well, yes, of course. How about the name, Mr. President? It is not the Workers' Party of Swordland, is it? Oh, dear. The only reason they are not in the assembly is because of the electoral threshold. They have gotten quite big. They are clearly getting outside help, and their connections to the paramilitary Bloodish force cannot be denied. All of a sudden, the reformists are trying to decrease the electoral threshold. Good. So that the Bloodish separatists can be legitimized in the assembly to achieve their aims of independence. Sure, like I said earlier, let them have a vote. That'll disarm the protest if we give them the option to leave, and maybe they'll choose to stay. Do you think that's his intention? I suspect his intentions are grander, but I wish, and that's the leader of the Freedom and Justice Party, the Soc Dem Liberal Party. But I wish the only issues were the Bloodish terrorists and Rumberg. Reformists suggested changes would also bring the communists, who are backed by United Contana, into the assembly. Do you see the pattern yet? I am not a conspiracy theorist. This is not a conspiracy theory. Haven't you been briefed by your security team? Maybe you should suspect them as well. We should take the necessary measures against communist and Bloodish plots, as well as increasing our military budget against a possible conflict. These judges are baddies. We will stomp them into the ground. Yes, we will. And of course, not fall into the traps of the reformists by listening to their demands. They are clearly plotting to weaken the president and our whole administration in order to exploit the situation. Which brings us to some very important information that we have. It's definitely something you need to hear, and it can change absolutely everything. With all due respect, Mr. President, says Dinosaur, I think this is getting slightly ridiculous. I want him to explain. The person in question is Franz Richter, the leader of the reformists. We have enough information to infer he has ties with Arcasia. Well, that's not shocking at all. That is not the superpower we want to cooperate with, but at the same time, of course, a liberal leader who is also a very wealthy man would have ties to the West. Arcasia is aggressively growing their influence around the world, and now we have Mr. Richter coming up with these ridiculous demands for a new constitution amid a chaotic period. They are not ridiculous, Hawker. Not at all. All the pieces seem to fit perfectly. This is why the Supreme Court will be doing what it takes to stop these reforms. How would you know that Mr. Richter has ties? Mr. Galande, we all know that he has been in Arcasia many times because it's been documented. But what would you think if he has been making hidden flights to the country? Let's be skeptical. He's been spotted at a hotel where they held the Conference of Economic Development in Volatile Regions right around that time. Oh dear. His trip was not documented, nor was he an official guest of the conference. We believe he had a meeting with President Volker, who we do not like, behind closed doors. Dear, dear, dear. I also have a couple more photos of him that were taken in Arcasia in different cities. One is from a couple months back. Again, none of it's documented. He also attended another event in Lesbia last week. The Arcasian Minister of Foreign Affairs was there too. Okay. So where did you find out? Who told you? Many soulists were already following the leads for quite some time. Okay. Handed me a small file. Hey, we get a file. I'm actually very happy that we entertained him enough that he gave us the dossier. It's good to have information, even if we don't agree with it. No trace of Richter's name. Clear photos of him that were taken in the conference, as well as remarks by lesbian and Arcasian citizens who claim to have seen him with businessmen. Okay. There was also an official transcript of one of his speeches in which he claimed to be in Benfey on the dates where he was spotted. Skimmed through the documents with skepticism that turned into surprise. Dinosaur thinks they are real. Of course they are real. They seem to suggest that he is behind the reformists. See, I didn't trust him, that Arcasia, rather, is behind the reformists. I didn't trust this leader from the start because I saw his business connections. That made me skeptical. They want us to have a weaker administration. It's a plot against Swordland. Now that you understand the reasons of our current stance and also our suspicions, who clearly have not given you this vital information, we appreciate the information, Mr. Hawker, but I advise against jumping to conclusions right away, says Dinosaur. We still need to check the information. Hawker says there's not much to think or check. It's clearly an emergency. In such cases, the Constitution gives the President the right to use his emergency powers. Am I being tempted by martial law? If I use martial law, I can get rid of all dissent and implement democracy by force. Nah. If we work together, he will not block us. Let's just get him to spell out his proposal. I cannot wait for the processes of the assembly. Must exercise my powers, which means I need to suspend parts of the Constitution to give me more authority. Can advise a strong security decree. Directly bypass the assembly. That is absolutely going too far, Dinosaur is right. Hawker wants to talk without Dinosaur. Regardless of the situation, I'll be proceeding with the reforms. Even though you are aware of our security threats, the justices think we're making a big mistake. They will not allow us to succeed. Well, we could threaten them in return, and we might want to do that. In fact, I think we do need to sideline these cranky old judges. They are the ones who are making a mistake. We will see, Hawker. We will see. This is a very scary situation indeed. Fortunately, I have my stick of pepperoni to keep me company while I make a hard decision. I do think we need to take care of them. I'm not particularly interested in saying anything weird like, how dare they? Because of course they dare. This is politics after all. I am scared of them. I'd be foolish not to be scared of them. We do have to make sure our reforms will pass the court, but that'll only happen if we take care of the judges. So let's take care of them. Or so we'll be doing whatever it takes to damage you. That's okay. We'll be doing whatever it takes to damage him. There are many Old Guard sympathizers in our party. It might be time to change our party. The old guards would indeed be my main rivals in the near future. That's a shame, but I don't think it's particularly avoidable. It is very much a shame, though. Well, time to hit continue. I suppose we should have looked at that one news article, but oh well. Trials of Democracy seems to be the next chapter in this year's story. You know, I am enjoying this game an awful lot. I started playing it completely sight unseen, just based on a very positive reaction on Steam. It was released 4 or 5 days ago. It's a very new game. I had heard nothing about it before this afternoon. I highly recommend it. Narble reports lack of hospitals. We do need to fix up our healthcare system. Back in the election, we chose to prioritize, what was it? I think it was food over education. No, it was education. We prioritized education over hospitals. That's what we did. But we do need to prioritize hospitals as well. Resistance from the British Freedom Front. We really do need to negotiate with them. I think we can find common ground. Recession hits the farmers again. Oh, that's not good. On the bright side, at least, we're not in a famine. We have plenty of food. Young swords and NFP flags burned. Well, that's very nice. We should be burning the fascist flags. Communist books burned. Well, that is far less good. Okay. You notice, by the way, how the fascist item that was burned was a flag. That's their symbol of unity. It's, a symbolic gesture of national greatness. Ugh. What was burned from the communists was books. There's a difference there. The residence of the president of Swordland. We are having a barbecue with our son, Frank. It was a Saturday afternoon, my first break from work in what felt like years, and the weather couldn't have been more perfect. Oh, that's beautiful. Trying to keep my mind off the upheaval sparked by the circus assassination, I lit the backyard grill. Oh, we're gonna barbecue up a storm. Yes, we are. Monica and Deanna were out shopping for craft supplies, and I'd given the staff the day off. It was just myself and my son at home. Such a troublemaker and a rapscallion he is. I wasn't sure how he felt about me at the moment, but I did know how he felt about barbecued ribs. Our cook had left some marinating in the refrigerator. Sure enough, as soon as Frank glimpsed the grill and the meat, he stepped outside to join me. Well, let's focus on the positive here. Quality time, not finally out of his room. Sure, if you can spare a few minutes out of your busy schedule. You know what? Fair complaint. Fair complaint. We are a workaholic. We are doing important things. I'm happy to see you now, son. It's okay. I know you've got the most stressful job in the country, and you've got to feed your family on top of it all. Yeah. I don't like my son very much, but I do love him. We both chuckled. I turned to tend to the fire. Here, let me try, he says. Okay, sure. Grabbed a fan and started quickly waving it over the coals. The fire roared to life. He looked at me with a grin as if he was expecting praise. Good job, son. Thank you, sir. It is in our utmost interest to fulfill our duties with precision. The grilling shall commence in exactly 1 minute and 32 seconds. Jesus. Son, have you become a robot? It was a spot-on impersonation of Dinosaur. Oh, that is funny. Dinosaur is a robot, that's for sure. He's a robo-dinosaur. I realized my throat was parched. There was a 6-pack of beer in the kitchen. You know what, son? I know you're like how old? You're in high school. I don't know exactly how old you are, but let us both have some beers. We want to bond. You can't, I mean, but Mom told me, oh dear, I don't want to go against his mother's wishes. His mother is a wonderful woman after all. I do need to bond with my son. My father was a poor man who struggled to provide for us on his meager income. He put me to work on the farm long before I was Frank's age, and even then we couldn't always make ends meet, yet we were always close as a family. Now that I was the president, I knew Frank would never face the same hardships I had. I couldn't deny that I felt a bit jealous. Dad, can I ask you something? You can ask me anything. It's just, I feel that there's so much that you've been hiding from me about your past and about what's going on right now. Like at dinner the night after the ball, you told me everything was under control, but it wasn't, was it? I know what happened in the 1920s. We learned all about it in school. Now with the protests and the riots, it's going to be the same thing. Dad, is there going to be a civil war in Swordland? I hope not. He let out a sigh. But what was it like back then? Uncle Pieter said the two of you went through a lot. I'm not a kid anymore, you can tell me. Oh, you're totally a kid. You've proven it every time we've interacted. But I'll tell you anyway. Before I could gather my thoughts, the familiar images started flashing before my eyes. Images of soldiers advancing towards me and my friends, weapons drawn. Of people I knew, friends and neighbors, being dragged through the streets and murdered in alleyways. And that little girl's face, which I'll never forget. Those were dark times. It seems like it. But you're nearly a grown man, son. Let's talk about it. I don't believe in hiding hard truths from children, myself. Frank leaned forward in his chair, his eyes wide. Well, we could tell him about the coup. We could tell him about the Civil War. We could back away from this horrible, horrible conversation and live to hide in fear another day. Let's tell him about the coup. I was barely older than you are now, studying history at the Dyer University of Culture. I was a freshman, excited and young. I had just left the classroom to go back home as I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the campus gates. As they got closer, I realized they were military camouflage tanks, carrying hundreds of soldiers. Those same soldiers that were supposed to protect Swordland's citizens pointed their guns at us. They immediately took control of the facilities. One of my friends asked what was going on and was arrested immediately. More people got angry and gathered in protest. Frank kept listening, a shocked look on his face. I did run, didn't I? Seeing the crowd gathering, I knew something was going to happen, something bad. I decided that it was impossible to go against armed men and ran away from the scene, which, by the way, people, running is not always cowardly. Sometimes you must live to fight another day, especially if you want to be a revolutionary. That's the sad truth of things. Very sad. Ran away from my friends who were getting arrested and shot to save my own dear life as a coward. I do still feel my flight was justified. Anyone would do the same. No one could sleep that night because of gunshots and sounds of boots. I can't forget the screams to this day. Frank leaned back in his chair, his shoulders slumped heavily. It was time to tell him about the Civil War. It was right after I met your mother. We had both joined the same human rights group to push for change after the coup in 1927. Eventually, I became convinced I wasn't doing enough, so I joined the Red Youth. Then one night it happened. Two different factions in the army, one of them led by fascist General Letterin and the other by socialist General Rickard, started fighting against each other. It was a bloodbath. Nowhere was safe. Frank shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. So we organized a protest one day in support of Rickard. In our minds, he was the better of the two and a true socialist. I'll tell him about the girl. It's my saddest memory, after all. So I pause a moment before continuing. It was horrible. They were waiting for us. Soldiers started beating and shooting at everyone and plowing their tanks into the crowd. Amid the chaos, there was this girl. I never forgot her face. I tried to save her, but I couldn't reach her in time. Frank's face had turned pale. He turned his eyes away from me. Well, that's enough for today, son. You've heard the worst parts of my life. He feels he shouldn't have asked us about it. He doesn't understand how his life is so easy. But one more thing. He knew that we joined the Red Youth back then. Do you mind if he asks why? Well, we don't mind at all, actually. You see, a communist revolution, son, for Swordland was and still is the only way. Frank raised his eyebrows, his curiosity still not satisfied, but sensing my reluctance to go on, he simply nodded. Sorry for bombarding you with questions. I know I complain sometimes, but my problems are nothing compared to what you went through. Son, I always loved you, but now I'm starting to like you. Oh, this is wonderful. This barbecue was excellent, and the choice to, give my son a beer, also excellent. Very happy with the way this worked out. I'm here to listen to them, no matter what they are. That's how we make our son respectful, not by beating it into him. Although that is tempting, because beating things up is fun. Before Frank could say anything else, I heard the front door unlock. Deanna and Monica's voices and the sound of rustling shopping bags filled the house. I hope we're not going to get into trouble for the beer. We might. All right, I'll be upstairs until dinner, says Frank, and he went in and dashed upstairs. I took a long sip from my beer, looking at the city and the now setting sun. I hoped that talking to Frank about my past had been the right decision. Part of me felt as if some sort of burden had been lifted. I'm sure it was the right decision itself. I'm sure. But I had the same nightmares again that night. Well, that was a very intense conversation with our son. Let's look at the news. Oh no. An attacker opened fire on protesters in Vessard, which is a rural place, I guess, with a lot of tourist traps and such. It was during a protest organized by the Communist Party against the murder of Bernard Circus. The attacker used a military-grade machine gun dated shortly after the coup, which is suspected to be part of the inventory of the Swordish armed forces. The army's against us. The attacker killed himself. Well, I suppose not the army, just one fascist soldier, right after shooting 25 people and killing 16. He took out the weapon from the newsstand at the square, brandished it and yelled, "Come, I will give you freedom." One witness said the highly charged word freedom was previously associated with bloodish separatists, but had been widely used during the previous month of protests against the murder. Wow. So I guess some people are going to blame the bloodish separatists for this. I wonder. I don't think they'd attack a Communist Party rally, but we'll see. Meanwhile, there was a school poisoning in Ribble. The police have arrested the principal. The principal poisoned 12 students with pesticide in a poverty-stricken city. Well, we'll see what the police turn up. This has been an auspicious week. Gelsord FC Arcana. Okay, that is the football game has been postponed due to protests. That's too bad. President refused to act in the face of communism. That's right. I will not act in the face of communism. I will act for the face of communism. This is the right-wing rag. We can ignore it. This is the left-wing paper. Undemocratic elections. Electoral threshold 10%. I agree with you entirely. We are trying to change that. Time for women to stand up. Women have been under pressure by the unequal society and the system of discrimination that was built by old men who knew only about war, said Katarina Horton. Who's Katarina Horton? Oh, she's British. She's a labor leader. She's the current spokesperson for the National Trade Union Federation. And she was elected as an independent to the assembly. I like her already. It's time for Swordland to realize we have to respect every individual, regardless of their sex. The movement must be supported by all Swordish women as well as men. Which movement is that again? Campaign for Women's Rights. I support it. Questioning Solist Education. The newly unveiled SIPA Education Performance Report unveiled a sad reality. We're ranked somewhat below average in terms of education. Not terrible, but somewhat below average. Primary gauge of the quality of education is made from a sample of 16-year-olds from each nation and their capacities and fields. Now, I'm willing to bet that our promises about investment in education around the time of the election probably made this better than it would otherwise be. But it is very true that we do not want to continue an education based on the principles of statism and nationalism. That's terrible. So the economic rag here says the government budget changes. Top experts in the country have been watching the changes to the budget. Okay. Not saying anything of substance there. This is an important paper. This is the Foreign Affairs paper. We made a statement denouncing... Oh, Agnolia made a statement denouncing Valgsland for a missing vessel. This is very unfortunate because we had wanted to make friends with Valgsland, but we've already made friends with Agnolia, and we're probably going to be caught right in the middle. And that's not good at all. I see there's a bunch of reports, and there's a nice exclamation mark here in Narble. So, reports and exclamation mark. I also see that the time is creeping its way towards the 1 hour mark, which means we're creeping our way towards the end of episode 4. We went a bit over the last few episodes. In fact, I think we've been recording for over 4.5 hours total for the 4 episodes. So I think I'm going to cut it right here. When we come back for episode 5, we'll be looking at these reports and we'll be seeing what exclamation mark has to say in Narble. This has been a most excellent game. I've enjoyed it very, very much, as I keep telling you over and over again. And this has been part 4 of Compound Fracture's series on Suzerain, whose name I keep forgetting no matter how much I enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and if you are, drop some likes and subscribes and other analytics helping or algorithm helping things. And I'll see you next time for part 5. Good night.